All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, we all heard the story today, basically, on it really started, from when the season ended with Cleveland Browns All Pro defensive end Myles Garrett requesting a trade out of Cleveland. Okay. And the futility of this organization has finally gotten to the Pro Bowler. All right. In 8 years in Cleveland, nobody has tallied more sacks in a Browns uniform than Garrett, as he has 102 and a half for his career. And we're talking about a guy who's a six-time Pro Bowler, as well as being the NFL's Defensive Player of the Year in 2023. But like I said, the losing and the futility have simply gotten to Garrett, as at this point, he wants to be a part of a championship team. Cleveland has only had two winning seasons since Garrett came to town, which is highlighted, if you will, by the Browns going 0-16 back in his rookie year of 2017. And after the Browns made the playoffs in 2023, they were a bitter disappointment this past season as they went 3-14. And because of that, they're going to be picking second in April's NFL draft. The Browns could be looking to rebuild once again. And if that's true, Myles Garrett wants no part of it. But he might not want a part of it. But at the end of the day, he's still under contract with the Browns. You have to ask yourself, would Cleveland honor that trade request, or will they simply go into next season with an unhappy camper on their hands? That's a big question that has to be answered. Okay. You look at Browns general manager Andrew Berry, and he has publicly stated that he has no intention whatsoever of trading Garrett. You look at Cleveland's current salary cap situation heading into next season, and honestly, the Browns are screwed. Okay, and a lot of this is because of all of the guaranteed money that they have decided, or they did decide to give rather, to Deshaun Watson. So it's one of those where you look at it and, again, this is what happens when you give somebody too much guaranteed money. And of course, they don't deliver. The Browns right now are in the negative, okay, for right as of right now, heading into next season. On top of that, they're looking, and when I say negative, they're talking about being or looking at being about 60 million over the cap heading into next season. Right now, we're also looking at a potential dead cap charge of $36 million if they were to trade Myles Garrett before June 1st. And then in comparison to that, it would be a $14 million cap hit if they decided to do so afterwards. But at this point, should Cleveland merely cut their losses? I talked about Deshaun Watson, and I'll say it again. This Deshaun Watson fiasco has hurt the Browns in more ways than one. Like I said, they're in cap purgatory, all the guaranteed money that they gave him. And of course, the biggest issue is Deshaun Watson has simply been a shell of himself from what we saw him be in the Houston with the Houston Texans. And of course, because of that, the Browns basically sold the farm to get him. And when you sell the farm to get a guy, it better work. And of course, when it doesn't, you got the Cleveland Browns right now. So, with that said, I pose the question to anybody out there: should the Browns trade Myles Garrett? And if the Browns do decide to trade Myles Garrett, okay, and that's the $1 million question right here. I think we're looking at a team that could get a king's ransom back for what we're talking about as being one of the best edge rushers in the National Football League right now, who is currently in the prime of his career. With the exception of Garrett's rookie season, he has registered double digit sack numbers in every year in the NFL. And just, think about it from the last 4 years alone: 16 sacks in 2021, 16 more in 2022, 14 in 2023, and 14 yet again this past season. And that's especially once you factor in all of the rule changes as far as protecting quarterbacks, making it tougher on defenders, not to mention the double teams that Myles Garrett consistently gets. And we're talking about a guy who had 14 sacks for the Browns this past season. Next closest guy was Darius Smith, who didn't even play for the Browns all season long, and he had 5 sacks. And as a team, Cleveland finished the season with 41 sacks. So that just gives you an idea of the presence that Myles Garrett has on a team. But hypothetically speaking, if Cleveland were to decide to trade Myles Garrett, this would be an opportunity for them to restock the cupboard, if you will, after all of the picks that they gave up to get Deshaun Watson. Now, short term for the Browns, are they a better team without Myles Garrett? Absolutely not, because again, guys like Myles Garrett, they don't come down the pike that often as far as their pass rushing ability. We're talking about a guy who's going to have a gold jacket 5 years after he retires. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. In my opinion, he's that good, and he has been that good. But it's one of those you're never theoretically going to get the true value in return for a guy that with the talent of Myles Garrett. But at the end of the day, what are you going to do with Myles Garrett? Because yes, the Browns have the second overall pick. Yes, there were talks about Cleveland possibly taking a quarterback and looking at the future, as clearly their present or their future is not Deshaun Watson right now. But nonetheless, Cleveland's not a guy away right now. Okay, so it might be one of those situations. Yeah, you're not better with Myles Garrett, but at the end of the day, he's just going to sit up there and languish and just waste away the prime years of his career playing for the Browns. But it's one of those where you look at the Browns, in my opinion, okay, they would have to clearly take a cap hit, and I think they should. Okay, at this point, because either way, you're going to take a cap hit. But clearly, you if you trade him before June 1st, that cap hit is bigger. But this is why I think they should do it, because if you're the Browns, you're clearly and you do decide to trade him. If okay, you got a scenario where you're clearly going to get picks back from Myles Garrett, but trading him now gives you the opportunity to get those picks for 2025 and get players on your team for the upcoming season that can go out there and make an impact. Whereas if you wait till after June 1st, yeah, you're still going to get picks because somebody's going to want to pony up to get Myles Garrett for the 2025 season. But guess what? Those picks, if you're the Browns, don't come into play until 2026. And regardless, Myles Garrett wants to go to a contender. Let's say you trade him to a contender. You don't know where that 2026 pick or picks would be slotted. At least right now, okay, if you're trading with a team and they're giving you a first rounder for 2025. Maybe it's a situation where it's in the teens. Okay, so you know what you have to work with as far as your picks. You don't know what's going to happen. And if it's a contender for 2025 and Myles Garrett has an impact and they go out there and have a big season, we're talking about a pick potentially towards the end of round number one, which basically could become a de facto second round pick. But what could Cleveland get back if they did decide to trade Myles Garrett? We saw it a couple of years ago with the Raiders as an example. They got a package from the Chicago Bears when they traded Khalil Mack, which included a couple of first round picks. I think Myles Garrett is definitely going to warrant multiple picks. At least one of those picks would be a one. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I do believe if the Browns did decide to put Myles Garrett on the market, because he clearly is not, um, there would be a bidding war. Okay, there are some teams that could use him that have cap issues of their own heading into next season. But if they were to decide to trade Myles Garrett, some teams that I feel would make a lot of sense for his services. I'm going to throw out the Washington Commanders first and foremost. You look at a team, they just got to the NFC Championship game. It's all about loading up with talent while you have quarterback Jaden Daniels on the cheap. Okay, would the Commanders want to go out there and part with some picks to get a guy like a Myles Garrett? I'm going to put the Detroit Lions out there as well. Yeah, they went out there and made the trade during the midseason once Aiden Hutchinson got hurt. And they got Darius Smith from Cleveland. But just a thought. I know that the Lions just lost both of their coordinators to head coaching gigs, but at the same time, Detroit still has talent on this team. You have Aiden Hutchinson coming back from that broken leg. Just think about it. Aiden Hutchinson and Myles Garrett. And at the same time, you can never have enough of a good thing as far as edge rushers because you need them in the postseason. The Los Angeles Rams, could they, possibly go out there and make a run at Myles Garrett? And then I'm going to throw out there a team that is currently getting ready to participate in Super Bowl number 59. I'm talking about the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly and Howie Roseman always find a way to have cap space. And I think they are a team that could go out there, give up a one and possibly some other picks. And Myles Garrett wants to win. Myles Garrett wants to be a part of a winner. I think it could make sense right there. But nonetheless, again, getting back to the Browns, I think Cleveland merely needs to suck this up because they could go out there and offer Myles Garrett an extension. But to me at this point, offering Myles Garrett an extension is the equivalent of giving him hush money to make him think that the problem is simply going to go away. This is not a money issue. Nobody's going to go out there or can go out there and offer Myles Garrett more money than the Browns. Myles Garrett doesn't care about the money at this point. Myles Garrett wants to be a part of a winner. And it darn sure is not going to happen with the Cleveland Browns. I think they just need to suck it up with the dead cap situation because it's one of those where we've seen in recent years, just look at the Denver Broncos from this past season, having a lot of money allocated to dead cap does not necessarily, prevent you from being able to go out there and compete. If you're the Browns, you could try to flip this around with a young quarterback early on in the draft. Go out there and retool and get some more impact players that you could try to build upon in the draft. But at the end of the day, it just goes to show you that when you have those opportunities in the postseason, you've got to make the most of them. You think back to Kevin Stefanski's first year with the Cleveland Browns in 2020. The Browns were 11-5. They got to the postseason for the first time since 2002. They won a postseason game for the first time since 1994. They went on the road and beat Pittsburgh. They had every opportunity to knock off the Kansas City Chiefs in the divisional round, and they simply could not do it. And a lot of people thought, you know what, this was going to be a building block for the Cleveland Browns. It never came to that. Things didn't work out with Baker Mayfield. They traded him to Carolina back in after the 2021 season to make way for Deshaun Watson, and of course, it has not worked out there. The injuries to Nick Chubb. I mean, we're talking about Nick Chubb, when healthy, was one of the better ball carriers in the National Football League. And unfortunately for the Browns, and of course, their very loyal fan base, it simply has not come back together since then. Myles Garrett has been there through all of that. Okay. And again, Myles Garrett is looking at it. Yeah, this is a guy that's still in the prime of his NFL career, but he wants to go out there and be a part of a winner. And unfortunately, it ain't happening in Cleveland. The issues with the Browns are clearly not a quick fix, and he wants to go out there and be a part of a winner. You just look at Saquon Barkley for an example, a part of bad teams for so many years with the New York Giants, and in year number one with the Philadelphia Eagles, he's in the Super Bowl and he has an opportunity to basically go from worst to first and be a part of a championship team. Myles Garrett, wants to have that type of impact or potentially have that type of impact with somebody else as well. So, what's next for the Browns and the Garrett? Of course, it's easy for Andrew Berry the Cleveland Browns general manager, to sit back right now and say, hey, we are not interested in trading Myles Garrett. Guess what? We've still got more than 2 months, closer to 3 months, if you want to be technical about it, between now and the NFL draft. A lot can change, okay? But I'll tell you like this, if you're Cleveland, you do have an opportunity to come out of this smelling like a rose, because I really don't think that you have a scenario where you could try to smooth this out with Myles Garrett. If you let this go past the draft, that means you've basically thrown in a towel for 2025. Why? Because all of those picks that you could potentially get for him would be in 2026 if you wait till after June 1st, and they're not going to have an impact for this year's team. Then, on top of that, you run the risk of having an unhappy camper who is your best player coming around the organization. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, Myles Garrett is not traded by the Cleveland Browns. OTAs, and if he doesn't show up, it's going to be a problem. OTAs, if he does show up, there's going to be questions. And it's not just going to be questions to Myles Garrett. It's going to be questions to Andrew Berry. It's going to be questions to Kevin Stefanski. It's going to be questions to other Browns players. And of course, that scenario would only heighten if he's around in training camp. What happens if he's a holdout? All of these things have to be factored in. So I think if you are the Cleveland Browns, I think now is the time to strike while the iron is hot. Myles Garrett is not going to finish his career with the Browns. Okay, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. All right, I just think that you have an opportunity, like I said, if you are the Browns, to skate from under this before it becomes a real problem. Let Myles Garrett go his way. You can come back and attempt to try to rebuild something, if you want to call it that. But nonetheless, what the Browns simply tried to do did not work. They had the first overall pick in consecutive years, both Baker Mayfield and Myles Garrett. Of course, Myles Garrett had a better, or has had a better, Browns career than Baker Mayfield did. And of course, Baker, after a brief stint with both Carolina and the Rams, has definitely found a football home with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Myles Garrett doesn't need a revitalization process. Myles Garrett just wants to go someplace and be a part of a winner, and it simply is not happening with the Browns. The ball is in their court, okay, and the pressure is not on them as of yet. But again, like I said, if you're the Browns, you really need to attack this thing head on before it potentially gets worse. Another star player frustrated with the futility of a franchise. And of course, when you talk about futility, unfortunately, the Browns are as bad as it gets. What's next for Myles Garrett and the Cleveland Browns? Guess what? I'm going to be paying attention to what comes out of Northern Ohio, just like the rest of us, and let's see where the football bounces, if you will. But nonetheless, if you're Cleveland, you want to try to get ahead of this thing. Will the Browns answer the call? Only time will tell. But folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank all of you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take this time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you're on the X, formerly known as Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. Now you can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin, and I am signing off. And I'm saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.